spectator.
Questions and reply, and
you're not
maybe
a spectator.
One question each. So Deputy Adams is the first on the list here. And Deputy Martin.
Well, last concluded to feha Ceisteanna gomsa. Agus ní bei chance a scar be fragra brecha a quarter and Taoiseach inniu. Agus ní cailer be on mar tamajeg Janu Disbracht inniu. Cuig me at nís milia na an a corme na Ceisteanna. I do think last concluded there needs to be a review of our Taoiseach's questions. Our structure, this isn't the first time this has been raised. I have 20 questions. Some of them are to do with events that occurred 5 months ago. Things have changed in between times. They're not topical. They're not current. So I'm clearly not going to get through the 20 questions which I tabled and asked supplementaries on them all. But I would like to come in, if I can, and I'll be as brief as I can, on a number of them. First of all, and of huge importance, is the Taoiseach acknowledging, for the first time in my knowledge in this chamber, that the issue of bank recapitalisation has not been raised by you or your government. Now, that's shocking news. And if you recall, in June 2012, it was claimed that a deal hammered out at an EU Council meeting would allow banks to be bailed out directly from the European Stability Mechanism. It was also claimed last concluded that the same measure could be applied retrospectively to this state. The Taoiseach told Morning Ireland that this news, and I quote, changes the game for us as far as bank debt is concerned, and that the method of breaking that link can now be applied to Ireland. And the Taoiseach described the decision as a seismic shift in European policy. I repeat, last Concordia, a seismic shift in European policy. Now, almost 3 years later, there's been no retrospective bank recapitalisation. And we know from correspondence received by MEP Matt Carthy last August from the Managing Director of the European Stability Mechanism that it was unlikely that the direct recapitalisation instrument will be used, but critically, he said that any decision would relate to the circumstances in the requesting ESM member. That doesn't even arise. We have made no request. So the issue hasn't even been considered, because our government, in order to avail of this seismic shift, in order to avail of this game changer, would need to make the request. So here we're told today that this hasn't happened. And we accuse you at different times of being compliant, of rolling over, of accepting a position that the citizens of this state, who make up less than 1% of the EU population, have been burdened with 43% of the cost of the European banking crisis. And citizens will be loaded for generations. Well, none of us are even a memory. People will still be paying back this legacy of bad decisions by EU bodies, the previous Fianna Fáil-led government, and by your government. So, Ceist, simply, isn't it true, Taoiseach, now that we've got from you clarity that you never applied for a retrospective bank recapitalisation, that you never had any intention of doing so, that this was all spin, this was all sound bites, this was all an attempt to influence public opinion? And would you not face up to that today? And would you not apologise, not least to your own electorate, the Labour electorate and the Fine Gael electorate and those people who voted for you, apologise for misleading them on this matter? I would rest it there, last Concordia, but I would like to think I would get back in on the other two questions, which are of huge importance, about the Palestinian state and on the dreadful plight of the refugees who are drowning on a daily basis in the Mediterranean.
Thank you, Deputy. But I will be calling the other deputies, as I said. Ms. Taoiseach.
First of all, I've said on many occasions, I've offered the deputies opposite the opportunity to put in a priority question each week if that's what they wish to do, rather than have these build up as they've done. And the point is that, as I said in my opening remarks, Deputy Martin, but you never listen, we have reported both before the European Council meetings and after, which would never happen before, to allow the deputies to raise their cases. And most of what we've dealt with here has been dealt with since December in those meetings. Now, Deputy Adams, you raised your question about recapitalisation. And you make the point that, as I said on that occasion back in June of 2012, that this matter would be a seismic shift in breaking the link between bank debt and sovereign debt.
You said that,
Yes, yes, and that's what's happened. Because no more, Deputy Adams, if a bank goes bust, will the taxpayer be out first to pay? The seismic shift in European politics is now in position, in that if banks go down in future, the taxpayer is not going to be. That's the breakage of the link between sovereign and bank debt, and that's now in position. Now, you come back now to the question of recapitalisation. Now, as I said, this government did not put any cent into Anglo-Irish. 34 billion gone down the tubes, gone, lost to the taxpayer, to the next generation. This government have put in restructuring of 30 billion. We expect to get all that back. There are two options to be considered here. One is the decision of June of 2012, when the European Council agreed with my proposition that there should be a capacity and a facility for direct recapitalisation for countries like Ireland, who were unfortunately forced out that gap. The banking inquiry is doing its business at the moment in regard to other matters about that. So that position still stands, that decision still stands and has not been changed or altered in any way. In fact, to use a phrase of your own, I might say, it hasn't gone away, you know. It's still there. So the question for the government, Deputy Adams, is what is the best thing to do here in the interest of the Irish taxpayer? The 34 billion squandered by the previous administration is dead, gone, washed away. So on behalf of the taxpayer in restructuring the banks, not for the bank's comfort, but for the customers' futures, that money was invested. We expect to get all of that money back. So what is the best thing to do? We've put money into Bank of Ireland. We've got back in excess of what was put in. We still own, on behalf of the people, a proportion of that bank. Same in respect of the ownership of the vast majority of Anglo-Irish Bank. PTSB had their valuation at about 2 billion recently. The Minister for Finance is very clear that the Irish taxpayer will be able to recover all of that money and possibly more in the time ahead. So the question for the government is, what is the best option to choose here? Is it to go the route of recapitalisation, which was made by the European Council on my proposition back in June of 2012, or is it to see what the valuations of the banks are and how that might be progressed in the interest of the Irish taxpayer? So instead of having one option, we now have two. Okay. That's the point of the decision of June 2012, and that position is still unaltered. The decision stands. It's there to be followed if the government decide to do that. Well, what we need to do, Deputy, is that we know the amount. We know the amount that was recapitalised. We know that we have the facility available to us to pursue following the European Council decision of June of 2012, and that's still on the table. But the new option, because of the improvement in the valuation of the banks following restructuring and recapitalisation, is also there to be pursued. Which of these two gives the best return for the Irish taxpayer? The government will make its decision based on what is best for the taxpayer and how well that's being pursued at the moment, as you understand. You had some response in respect of monies invested in Bank of Ireland. You now have PTSB being valued at approximately 2 billion, and the Minister's made it clear that he intends to have a determination on a proportionate value of a section of Allied Irish Bank to see what that might be. So we're not in a position just yet to make a decision as to which one is in the best interest of the taxpayer. The government's only priority here is to pursue this to a point so that we can determine which is in the best interest of the taxpayer. Is it the route of recapitalisation, or is it the route of getting the return on the people's money by virtue of moving on the banks? And work is proceeding on that element, with the Minister for Finance being very confident that in respect of the Irish taxpayer, we will get back all of the money invested by this government. Unfortunately, what happened before is dead and gone and washed away.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Martin.
I think